Whenever you're ready, Senator.
I don't know how ready I am, but I'll tell you in a few minutes. First of all, I appreciate the Senator Dan Sullivan, District 20, Jonesboro, Arkansas. Appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to speak to this bill. It's been 8 or 10 years since I was invited to the Black Caucus to speak, and I was invited when I was in business and talk with the caucus about some bills, and everything turned out well. So this is about Senate Bill 71, which is an act to prohibit discrimination and preferential treatment by the state of Arkansas and other public entities. So I'm going to kind of briefly go through the bill. I think the best part will be for questions and answers and for us to talk. But briefly, just to go through it, the bill actually starts on, if you have it in front of you, but I think it's section 20, page 11 is where the actual bill starts. Everything that precedes that describes what is in section 20 and gives further detail to that. So the original bill that was filed started with section 20, and then the amendment that was filed was an add-on, although that's not the order it shows up actually on the bill. We've met with several different groups. I have a number of other meetings with groups later today and all this week. The bill passed committee. When it went to the floor, I asked the Senate to, I promised the Senate before I adopted the amendment that we would wait at least a week to hear from various community members and other legislators before we ran it on the floor, and I appreciate that. Representative Richardson and I talked out in the hall briefly, and I again appreciate the opportunity to come here. But if you look on page 11, A, it says, as used in this section, the state. So this bill only applies to the state. So whatever gains or losses, I guess, that have occurred because of affirmative action, many of those happen in the public sector. This is only the state sponsored. Justice Roberts said a while back, I don't know, 2007 or 8, Justice Roberts said that you can't end discrimination by more discrimination. In fact, he says you can't end racial discrimination by further racial discrimination. Justice O'Connor in 2003 said that in about 20 years, I forget the exact number she said, but it was about 20 years, there'll be no more need for affirmative action. And this bill takes us in that direction and ends affirmative action by the state in Arkansas. If you look further down in line 13, it says this section does not prohibit consideration of the state from bona fide qualifications. You can read down through there. I'm not going to read all of that, but it's very specific on what the bill does not do. For example, if a business or an individual is getting money from the feds to support that has affirmative action language in it, this bill does not stop that. It does not prohibit if you're involved in a federal program that requires affirmative action. That's not barred. So we allow for all those things to happen. I think many of you probably read an article in the Democrat Gazette, I think a few days ago, Saturday or Sunday, that did a good job of explaining what the bill does and doesn't do. I've been trying to think of the best way to say this. I was an employee and an employer in several different businesses. I supervised several thousand people over that course of that time. 30 years, 35 years, 30 years in education, much of that as a supervisor over a number of people, and much of it in the private sector. I was never called racist during that time. And matter of fact, people sought me out as a leader because I was fair across the board. And it wasn't until I got in the legislature that I got that label. And I reject that. I reject that this is a racist bill. There are many people on both sides. If you look at polls from the private sector polls of the general population, you'll see that about 60 to 70, depending on the poll, are opposed to affirmative action in colleges, college admission. Matter of fact, the Supreme Court is due probably sometime this year. They're hearing a case by an Asian female, I think, where she was denied application to Ivy League schools, and she has filed that court case on 2 different colleges, and the Supreme Court watchers say that she will likely prevail, which will end effectively affirmative action in college admissions. So our state is definitely moving in the direction of backing off of affirmative action. Some say this bill is premature, that yes, we want to end it, but this is premature. And I'd really like to hear what if you think that affirmative action needs to end, what's your timetable? What's the trend? The trend right now is for people to find more groups and more people to claim aggrieved status in order to achieve their end. That's our trend now. And we keep adding groups to that, or people to that group, which further divides us. And at some point, we're going to have to move in the other direction. And as the article in the Dem Gazette said, it's time to have this conversation. I don't know if the bill will pass or not. I don't know how much support there is in the Senate, actually, or the House for this bill. But it is time to have this conversation, and I'm very interested today if somebody has a plan on how to end affirmative action, or end discrimination is a better term. If you have a plan on that, I'd like to hear it. And maybe you can help work on this bill to do that. Also, I've heard a lot about, and I'm still researching it, about the women and minority owned business section in AEDC. That's who administers that. I'm going to ask you a question, and not to answer publicly, but just in your mind. How many women and men in the state of Arkansas with 3 million people are a part of that process? They've actually filled out an application and they have a loan outstanding. And Senator Ricky Hill is here today. Senator Hill is a banker. I talked with him last night about what banks do in this area, and if the chair would allow, maybe he can speak later on to that point. The answer to the question is there are 30 people statewide who are using the minority-owned business platform. 30. Senator Hill said if they had a banker doing that, they'd be fired. It's a very small program, a very small percentage of people. And this comes from AEDC, by the way. I've talked to them, and they're bringing more information. 30 people, their package is about, that they can loan, is about 1.8 million, 1.5 million. That's all that's available through that program. And the state guarantees 90% of that loan. The average loan is about $50,000. So if you were to borrow $50,000, they would guarantee 90% of that. However, you have to have collateral for that. They're guaranteeing a loan just like a bank would. They're guaranteeing a loan that you have collateralized. So you're going to have to provide, on a $50,000 loan, you're going to have to provide whatever the math is there, $45,000 or so in collateral, which is the same that you'd get at a bank. In fact, if you went to the Small Business Administration, who oversees and operates a very similar program, that would be the same thing with a small business loan. If you went banks, and Senator Hill, you can nod in or correct me if you want, but banks redlining, I don't know how many you are familiar with that, but says that a bank, if you're going to loan money, you have to go inside of that red line circle, and that has to be a package of loans that you are trying to take out. So businesses and banks are reaching out to those communities to try to help. So again, I don't know the answer to it, but I would guess that many people, women and minority-owned businesses, are reaching out to other resources, because what we have is a very small package. I've also reached out to the Department of Education. I haven't heard back from them yet. And I'm supposed to get from AEDC the spreadsheet on the numbers, what the actual loans are and who they're to. As soon as I get that, Mr. Chair, I'll send that to you for distribution. I've reached out to the minority teachers group. I'm supposed to have a call, I hope later today, to find out how many teachers are actually a part of that. And I think that's critical information. What I do know is we have a huge teacher shortage. And anybody that we can get in those teacher shortage areas, we're thankful for. And we have tried giving bonuses to teachers. We've tried to lure them in a good way down to areas where they're needed. And I get it when people say students need to see somebody that looks like them, talks like them, they have some similar things. That's important regardless of your race or your sex. All that's important. But the most important thing is having qualified teachers down there. And Mr. Chair, when I get those numbers, I'll share those with you. That's one of the reasons we're holding this bill back for a week, is to get that information. But I believe that that's all true. So I will draw to a close. I'll try to answer any questions you have on the bill. And if Senator Hill can help me answer some questions, Mr. Chair, would you allow that? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Senator, for giving us some feedback in where this came. I will just follow up on one of the things that you said with regards to minority-owned and women-owned businesses of that group. It's my understanding is that hasn't been well publicized across the state, so a lot of people don't even know that exists, which may contribute to the low numbers that you talked about. We briefly spoke about that yesterday, I think.
Yeah, we can get, I'm sorry.
So I think there, and from my understanding, there was a big push to get that into all of our communities right before COVID. You correct me if I'm wrong, Representative Flowers. I think they were going around the state trying to introduce people to that program, and then COVID happened and it kind of died at that point. But I think there's still some opportunity there, but enough with me. We'll
May I
start
respond to that briefly?
Please.
Yeah, they, as banks do, they have a cap on how much they can loan. And that cap is about 1.8 million. So they can't take very many more people. They've got 1 million out now. So they've got about $800,000 left in that for loans. So if we publicize it more, we'll quickly reach the cap on what they can finance or guarantee.
Senator Chesterfield.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Sullivan.
Good morning.
Senator Hill, welcome to the caucus meeting. Senator Hill, this bill is about 20 years old. The tenants that you delete are about 20 years of age. Is that correct?
Say that again now. I couldn't hear you.
Sullivan. I'm sorry.
That which you are deleting is legislation that is about 20 years of age, is it not?
Well, Senator Hill isn't a co-sponsor on the bill. I don't know if
No, I'm
She
talking
meant-
about the bill itself. The
It should
bill
be.
itself, those areas that you are deleting,
You were
Senator,
addressing
I'm saying Senator Sullivan.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, I'll take your word. I don't know, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, if you look at your bill, it says that,
Okay.
okay? And what I'm trying to find out is, how did you come up with the bill from, or what was the genesis of the bill? If the legislation is 20 years old, because I was around when much of this was promulgated, when we were dealing with properly funding schools, dealing with the issue of inequity in public school funding. Some of this came about us during that particular time in 2003. You were not in the House, you were not in the Senate. So how did this come to your attention is what I'm trying to find out.
Well, a couple of ways. One, there are 8 other states, I believe maybe 9, that have this legislation, and I believe discrimination is wrong. And so when I look at it and I think discrimination is wrong, I'm going to take steps as a legislator to end discrimination.
What I'm trying to find out, sir, particularly, you went directly to this piece of legislation. What led you to this legislation?
This is the same legislation that is in, I think, all 8 other states. So that's what led me to. I don't know how to answer your question. If you
Did you
have
just come up with this out of the blue, or you started studying other states and how they did away with affirmative action and you wanted to follow in that footstep? Is that what you're saying?
I think discrimination is wrong.
I understand
Well, let me
that.
finish my
Please.
answer, Senator. I think discrimination is wrong, and I don't think furthering discrimination ends discrimination.
Well, you've already said all that, Senator Sullivan. I don't believe discrimination should be appropriate at any time. And trying to help people overcome past wrongs is not, to me, discrimination. We'll disagree on that. What I'm trying to find out is, where did you find this particular legislation? I'm not talking about what 8 other states did, because 8 other states didn't do this 20 years ago. What was the genesis of your legislation? How did it come to your attention that this particular piece was the piece you needed to use to eliminate discrimination?
This legislation is modeled after California, who ended affirmative action, I think, in 2006. And when I look across the board and trying to decide what legislation I want to run, this is an important thing for the state of Arkansas, is to be a leader in ending discrimination. I don't know if you want to answer the question for me. I'll say yes or no.
Did
I don't know
someone
how to
bring
do
this
it.
to you, or did you just do the stuff on your own?
Did somebody give it to me?
Did someone bring this particular piece of legislation to you and say, this is the legislation you need to produce in order to end your discrimination, or just somewhere out of the blue you said, this is it? Where did it come from?
Well, as I said, it came from 8 other states had this legislation.
Well, we're not going to get to an answer.
Well, I don't know.
And then
No, I think you're presuming an answer, and I'm
No.
giving it to you, and you don't want to accept it. I want to try to end
I don't want to argue with
discrimination.
you,
That's
sir.
my goal.
If that's your answer, that's your answer.
Thank you.
Okay? And let me just express my concern when we continue to raise the issue of the great thinking of the current Chief Justice of the United States. What he says does not ring as true with this particular group as it does with others, for very obvious reasons. It ranks right up there with Roger Taney's court. It ranks right up there with Melville Fuller's court. And those were the courts that gave us Dred Scott and Plessy v. Ferguson. So when people bring that to us, it raises red flags in and of itself, because our experiences with the Roberts Court is extremely different than the experience of others. And when we talk about, so I read the Democrat Gazette's article, and you are going to do what you do, but you have found some legislation that's 20 years old, and you decided that you were going to promulgate this legislation and end any attempts by this state to do anything at all that would give a hand up to someone. And no one in this state has ever been sued because of its great effort in this arena. Has anybody been sued in the state of Arkansas for hiring someone, some African American, Asian American, Hispanic American over a white American? Has that happened to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, thank you.
And you know, something the bill does, it doesn't actually adds to help people. You know, there's a really good article in Arkansas Business about a young man, Mr. Arlo Washington. Huge article on it about a African American who started with nothing, opened a barber school, expanded, and I want to call Mr. Washington. I'm interested in seeing what help he had from the government. But if this does not eliminate that fund, so if there's $1.8 million in the fund to help people of all races, all genders, help everyone, this doesn't eliminate that. So African Americans or others who want to apply for these loans that's out there still can. It doesn't eliminate anything.
Well, let me just say this. As the individual probably with the longest experience in this body, sitting in this room, when we started this process some time ago, we were trying to level the playing field. And the playing field has never been leveled, because every 20 years or so in history, when we begin to level it, people say, we've leveled it enough. And then the field once again gets unleveled. Had I not been one of those individuals who was chosen as a National Achievement Scholar I would not have gone. I would not have had an opportunity to go to Hendrix College. Each one of us in this room has had some help. I don't know if you did or not, by government programs that were designed specifically to help African Americans get an opportunity. And I don't know about Mr. Arlo or anybody else. I don't know him. I just know my own story. Coming from Hope, Arkansas, and segregated schools, there was an effort made to make sure that some of us were able to get an education. And the federal government had an interest in it. The federal government had an interest in providing a GI Bill. But when the GI Bill came, redlining came with the GI Bill. When we had Social Security, it was supposed to be a step up for folks. When Social Security came, it excluded maids, the majority of whom were African American. So we've not been dealing with a level playing field here in this country for a long time. But those programs that have been put in place have helped people. And I don't label you anything, sir, except my colleague in the Senate. We can agree to disagree about the value of this bill. And my question was simply, did you just come up with this on your own? Did you get some help from somebody else helping you find out where this particular legislation lay and therefore use this particular bill? That was all I wanted to know. But I appreciate you being here, sir. We are not here to label you. We are here to have a conversation with you. We don't agree with you on this bill, certainly. But we appreciate you for coming and having a conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Chesterfield. Senator Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Sullivan, for coming to discuss this piece of legislation. And let me say something to you that I acknowledge, and I want you to acknowledge if you can. I acknowledge from your testimony and from talking and listening to you since this has come aboard, this legislation has been filed, that you can't see, you can't understand what we understand. You can't understand how bad this is because you haven't lived, or do you currently live as we live? So let me acknowledge that to you, that I understand your bewilderment to some degree. I really do. But let me tell you the facts of what this does. Everywhere in your legislation, in this legislation, where there is the word equity, you've crossed it out and put equality. Now, equity was brought about and put here because what it recognizes is a need to supplement because of some damage that has been done. What equality does, it makes an assumption that everything is level. It is not. If you look at the data, every year in budget, we ask every agency to report to us the percentage of minority participation in contracts. I'm just talking about contracts now. And if you look at those numbers, how dismal they are, all they do, and this is not your numbers, these are numbers that they present that should indicate to you where we are. And it should definitely not make you think that this is a discriminatory, that affirmative action, as you call it, and I just think it's being fair, is discriminatory. What it's doing in America that we've lived in is trying to do something to bring equity to a situation where we know the history of America. We don't have to sit here and call each other names. We can really get better if we do better. And we recognize the wrongs that have happened. We recognize the many people that have not had access to economic stability or economic growth. What these things were put in place for was to give people educational, economical, and other access that they just didn't have because we grew up in a very different America. We know what America has been. We're not going to debate that. We're going to try to get better from that. And for us to say today, in 2023, a piece of legislation that says, we're there, this needs to end, or even to call this discrimination when we've tried to put in measures throughout your legislation that you've stricken out, those measures would bring, hopefully, us up to par, or at least give some consideration, is the words that's used, or recognition for others, be it blacks, women's, Hispanics, Latinos, anybody different than the majority. That we're not there. Now, do you not see that? I acknowledge that you don't. I hear you. And I just think you can't see it. But what I hope you will do at the end of the day, I hope you will hear from those, although we're the minority, that there's a rule of majority and right to minority. I hope that we can articulate to you in a manner that make you understand the need that you not proceed with this because of the serious damage that it does. And I have 6 pages here that I can talk to you about. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pass the mic. But I did want to say to you, it's just listening to you again, I hear where you are. I've heard it before. But God, I pray that you can hear what this is doing to us. And this is not discriminating against people. This is not doing that. This is just trying to level the playing field. And we haven't even gotten close, Senator. Not even close.
May I respond?
Please.
Yeah, I think your presumption that I don't understand the problem, I take exception to.
How?
Well, I'm getting ready. So to say this, to imply that I don't think there's discrimination in the world is completely wrong. Discrimination has been with since the beginning of time, and discrimination will be till the end of time, if you believe in those things. They are always present, and they are present in every one of us. It's part of the condition of man. So for someone to imply that I don't recognize there's discrimination in the world, I completely reject, and I think that's, well, I'll say it politely, I completely reject that I don't understand what discrimination is. We all do it. It's, again, from the beginning to end of time. So that presumption is wrong. Secondly, most of the gains that you're describing happened in the free market, not because of affirmative action. They happened because women decided to go back to work. They decided to go back into the workforce. They made those personal decisions. That's just, again, what's going on. And at some point, you talk a lot about it hasn't ended yet. I'd like to hear what your solution to end it is. And when is that? When does it happen?
Oh.
Well, let me keep going. I want your full answer. I would appreciate a full answer. Because if we're going to end discrimination, there has to be a target that we say, we're there. And I have never heard, we're there. And this bill is an attempt to say what that looks like, what the end game is when we know. Is it quotas? Do women have to own a certain percentage of the businesses? Do minorities have to own a certain percentage of the businesses? What are the minorities? How many minorities are there that are going to claim aggrieved status? And how do we decide what that aggrieved status is? Currently, as I mentioned earlier, the trend is to identify more aggrieved people and have further discrimination. That's not how we end discrimination. So I'd love to hear what those parameters are to when we say we've reached it.
Okay, thank you. So real quick, because I'm going to pass the mic, to the first part of you saying that you take exception to what the presumption is, I'm going by the document that you presented, that you've authored. So I'm not making a presumption. I'm reading, and I'm looking at strike language and new language. So any presumption that is made is in the document, not me. If that's your document, your name is at the top of it, then you have to hold responsibility to it. So there's no presumptions being made. I never would say this without reading this. The last thing that you mentioned was, where does it end? I think that's a good conversation. And I think a bill that talked about how we can end it, which would be by creating measures to make sure we level the playing field more so than we have. We've made some efforts in that, but we can do a lot better, and we can continue it. But certainly legislation to end it never would make sense at this point in time. But thank you so much.
Representative Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. At the beginning of your presentation today, you mentioned we need to have some discussions about affirmative action. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. My question to you is, why didn't we have this discussion before the bill was filed? I'm talking about a true discussion about it.
Well, my experience is, and again, everybody has their own experience, my experience is that people don't get serious about discussing a bill until it's filed. And you can talk about things and talk about things, but when you file a bill, now you have laid out parameters for our discussion.
Well, I don't know about your neighborhood, but that don't happen in my neighborhood. We serious about it from day one. Now, one of the
Can I
things.
respond to that?
Sure.
So then hasn't the Black Caucus filed a bill to end discrimination? Well, if you talk about it all the time and you're discussing discrimination, it seems like the Black Caucus would at some point file a bill to end it. Or have a discussion. I just haven't heard that discussion either.
Well, let me go on to something else, because this what you're saying is that we'll poison the well and then complain about the water. So I just totally disagree with you on that. But let me just say something to you. When I graduated from college, I never would have gone to work for Abbott Laboratories if it wasn't for affirmative action. The only reason why I got that job was because of affirmative action. They did not look at my qualifications. I was qualified for the position, but they didn't want me to have the position. I interviewed twice for the position and was denied because I did not have experience. Then they came back a year later because the guy that they had hired for the position didn't work out, and they hired me. Now, what was the difference? I didn't have no experience day one. I didn't have no experience when they hired me. I got the job because the government opened a door for me to get the job. And let's take it a step further. When we integrated Central High School in '57, if we had never done that, many of us would not be sitting in this room today. Would not be sitting here today. So my point is this, that you and I and all of us in here, somebody paid the price for us to be here today. And what you want to do, and what it seems like your bill wants to do, is to turn back the hands of time. All I'm asking you to do, Senator Sullivan, and you and I have been in prayer meetings together. We prayed together. You talked about your problems. I talked about my problems. We prayed that God would deliver you from some of the things that you were going through. And you prayed God would deliver me. Now, all of a sudden, if we're Christians, we should be having this discussion without all these people being in the room.
Amen.
We could sit down and talk about it. But it appears to me that you don't want to talk about it. Your mind is made up. I don't care what we say here today or do today. I don't think, oh, the lights went out on me. I don't care what we say or do today. I think your mind is made up. And my question to you is, this bill is going to divide us or bring us together? Will your legislation help us or hurt us?
I'll respond in a couple of ways. One, I'm glad we're having this with all these people here. Because my experience is that sometimes when we sit around at the table and have conversations, they're not involved. Agree or disagree. Having people here listening to what goes on, I think is a good thing, and I strongly disagree with you.
Wait a minute, let me defend myself. I never said it was a bad idea. I never said that it's a bad idea to have the discussions with all these people here. So let the record reflect that. I'm simply saying that we could have had this discussion and worked out some things before all of these people came. That's all I'm saying to you.
Okay. Senator, when did I send you a copy of the bill, the Democrat? Senator Ladding, I sent you a copy of the bill when?
I don't recall.
Did I send you a copy?
I do believe you did, yes.
And has it been at least 2 weeks?
I know it was very early in session.
Okay, so I did reach out.
You didn't send it to the caucus?
Hold on. Hey,
Aren't you the chair of
excuse me,
the-
Representative, let's allow him to answer, and then we'll continue.
Okay.
Sorry. Are you asking me to continue?
Yes, you continue, Senator.
So, I did notify the chair of the Democrat Party several weeks ago, sent him a copy of the bill. I've worked with others. I forgot the Representative Allen's full question, but I think, one, I think it's appropriate to have these. I think until a bill is filed, it doesn't generate a lot of interest. I do have meetings scheduled later today with the group and other meetings. I've answered a lot of phone calls emails. So there has been a lot of conversation. Whether or not it's happened with the Black Caucus or not, I feel like I fulfilled my obligation to notify the Democrat Party, because I know that's where it came from, the opposition would come from. And there'll be some in the Republican Party too. But again, I feel like and when I filed the amendment and the Senate approved the amendment with Democrat vote and the Black Caucus support, promising I would have these kinds of meetings. And Representative Richardson stopped me in the hall and said, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Yeah," and that's what we're doing. And to your point that I have my mind made up, I think I've demonstrated with many other bills that I'm willing to listen to all sides. I had another controversial bill, Senate Bill 81, with the libraries. And I had a meeting with the Arkansas Library Association president, who I asked and who did send me amendments to the bill. And we're making those amendments. So the claim that I have my mind made up and that I'm not going to change my mind, I think is just false. But you're entitled to your opinion.
And Senator Sullivan, let me just clarify one thing that I heard you just say. Black Caucus did not respond or support that. If you sent that to the Democratic Caucus, that we're a bipartisan body. Just
fair point.
To be clear on that. Representative Flowers, we'll come back. We'll come back to you if that's okay. Yeah, Representative Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Sullivan, I just wanted to first make a couple of points based on what I heard you say regarding the Minority and Women-Owned Business program with the Economic Development Commission. You were talking about the loans and the percentage of dollars that were utilized in that program, and I think that's 60%, and that's during and prior to COVID. And as Representative Richardson mentioned, we had been very active in making sure that people in our districts were made better aware about the program. And I would add that I think that there are several programs in the state and perhaps in the private sector that are at 60% usage and are considered successful. But I wanted to point out, for the benefit of you and the audience, that that program is not limited to loans. It really is something to engage small businesses into state contracting and state businesses, as well as accessing capital in the private sector. The largest component of the program is certification. And I would ask that you, as we will get current data regarding how many businesses in the state get their businesses certified. And that is so that those businesses can be presented as being, having the requisite funding or capital and experience, tax status. And we've seen that be successful for many people in our districts and have worked with that program. Also, that program, as well as other state statutes, set goals. So we are not a state that deals with quotas. We set goals. And so when you ask about, how do we end discrimination, we have to set goals. And then we have to set policy and have programs to get us there. And what I see your bill doing is reversing our opportunity to get us there before we've reached those goals. And I'd like to point out that Mr. Washington, I do know Mr. Washington, who was there for his ribbon cutting for the credit union before it even became a credit union. And I would like to let you know that he is certified. He has actually used this very program that you would be cutting him off from, and others like him. And I would like to point out that he is exactly the example of why the program exists. He certified his business, that helped him with his barbershop, that helped him with making loans. to folks who would come to his and other barber programs, which then led to him being able to get into the CDFI arena, which then led him to be able to open his credit union. That's what this is about, and that is not discrimination. So I wanted to make that point to you and ask for you to think about that as you consider amending your bill or perhaps not running it at all.
May I respond to that portion?
Please.
You know, this does not end the program. It expands those who qualify. So if one wants to qualify, one can qualify, but it ends the discrimination that says only a certain population can qualify. And currently, we are adding more and more groups to the aggrieved status or the qualified status. And if we continue to go that way, we continue to divide our nation and our state.
To that, I would point out that when you target a group that has been discriminated against to provide access where there has been none, or provide access and open doors that have been legally and illegally closed to that group, that is not discrimination. And turning around and then saying, we're going to open it up to everyone. We don't need to target anybody anymore because that's discrimination. It turns it on its head and it muddies the whole discussion. And I think that's why you are feeling and getting such pushback about calling these programs discrimination. They absolutely are not, and have very, very little impact, if any at all, to the broader population who enjoy those doors being open. So when those groups are targeted, and we say as a state or as a country, hey, let's figure out how the government can set an example. The way that the government stopped discriminating against Black people, Black men, from being able to serve in the military. It was the government that set a different standard so that the private sector could then follow. And I think that when we say all of a sudden 20 years later that that's discrimination, I don't think we can have a fair, clear, and intelligent conversation about where we are and where we should go to end discrimination. But my question is this. The language that is stricken specifically focuses on women and racial and ethnic minorities, but it doesn't mention who is also included in the program, veterans. So veterans are targeted to benefit because we recognize that many veterans coming from service experience a great deal of health issues, experience a great deal of economic issues and challenges in opening businesses. So that veterans were included in this. They are not included in the legislation to end affirmative action, which includes veterans. Can you tell us why?
I'll be glad to see. I think that's a valid point. I need to go back and consider that, and if you want to offer some an amendment to help us do that, I'd be very happy to see it. You know, the other point is some of the discrimination. I'll go back. I said it earlier. Some of the discrimination is not government discrimination, and government has a very poor record in ending discrimination. In fact, government throughout time has been the author of discrimination that really hurt people. And again, this bill is designed to include everyone and let people who are, if you'll notice in the bill, it talks about people in need. It just doesn't limit people in need to a certain population, but it does say people in need. So if there is a need, one would still qualify.
What would be the need?
Well, the people that are running the program would decide what those needs are. They'll have to promulgate legislation and bring it before the body to help describe that. I mean,
So if, as this is a program that is very specific about what the need is, what the qualifications are, and what targeted groups have the need, why would we expand it? As a matter of fact, what would the program be if it's not targeting at anyone and it's open to everyone and not recognizing the discrimination that exists?
Well, if one could describe a need, and right now those groups are defined by their by the targets, by the profiles that are listed here. So if there's a need, whether it's your heritage, whether it's your upbringing, you were in a poor background, a poor neighborhood, but that would be done in rules. They would promulgate the rules through this body as to what that need looked like.
But what I'm saying, Senator, is you have filed and drafted a bill that is very specific in striking language around civil rights, striking language around equity, striking language that targets the groups in need as it relates to ending discrimination. And you want to open it to everybody and let somebody else decide what the need is. It just seems to me like you would know what the need is if you're trying to change legislation that already addresses a need.
Well, first of all, this bill does not end civil rights.
I didn't say that. No. I said your bill strikes language that refers to civil rights. Anywhere in some of the language around other agencies, for example, and it says civil rights. As a matter of fact, the teacher program,
right,
when it talks about civil rights responsibilities, you completely strike that out.
But that does not end your civil rights.
But I didn't say it did, though.
Okay,
I
then
said
we're in agreement.
But it
Yeah.
no, well, about that, but in general, no.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we can agree on it. Does the bill eliminate or restrict one's civil rights?
I'm not, you know what, I mean, it's your bill, and I can't talk to you about what your intent is, but if I read it, it strikes civil rights out of the language in the law. That's what it does.
Okay.
Now, what's your intent in striking that language? I can't speak to it, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of stricken language, and you're telling me in the title that the bill is for fairness for everyone, or to not discriminate against anyone, but you're striking language in laws that seek to provide equality and equity and address civil rights violations. And so I'm just trying to understand what you're doing.
Okay, and again, this is not a hearing on the bill. This is an open table discussion. And as we have talked about, this is an opportunity for us to share what we think we know or what we actually know. So I would be very interested if anyone in this group thinks that this bill eliminates one's civil rights. I would like to know the legal basis for that. And if it's true, then I'm open to amending the bill.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't say that, and let me just end by saying this. I don't have any amendments because I don't think that there's a need for this bill. As a matter of fact, I think there's a need for us to provide legislation that actually enforces the laws that we have on the books and the goals, because the problems still exist. And to a comment you made earlier about why the Legislative Black Caucus has not filed a bill to end discrimination, every time we stand up and speak for or against a bill, and every time we file a bill, that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Scott. And just FYI, I know that Senator had somewhere to be at 11:30,
Okay.
just FYI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Just a couple quick questions. Do you currently know what the percentage is that the state is currently doing in business with Black-owned or minority and women-owned businesses?
Yeah, I have a text from Mr. Hudson, I believe his name was, at AEDC. And his text, I'll try to find it in a second, but it says, I think it says 30 participants. And
So you don't know the percentage, but just 30 participants?
I don't know what a percentage of what?
Because I think this bill will impact vendors, all of our vendors that are women and Black-owned,
So you're asking
minority. Yeah, so I was just
the
asking,
percentage,
you know,
how many
percentage
women-owned businesses are
in
there?
the state that we're currently
in the
doing
state?
business with.
And
Is it
how many
10%?
participate in this? I don't know
or-
the answer to that.
Okay.
But I do know that 30 after Senator Hill left. He's a banker.
I'm not talking about the number of participants in that specific program. I was just talking about totality, the number, if you knew the percentage number that we are doing business in the state with minority or women-owned businesses. Would that be 17%?
I don't know the answer to that.
10%? Okay.
So I've actually asked for that information, so as soon as I get that from Kevin Anderson and his team, I'll pass that to the team.
Okay, thank you. Florida passed a bill that was similar to this, but it seems like your bill goes a whole lot further. What I do want to bring into the conversation, I also want to share Arlo's information with you. His credit union is in my district, and we're really good friends. So I think as you're being open to meeting with individuals, I would like for you to listen and be able to have some conversation and
I was
dialogue
trying to
with
get
him.
his phone number today.
I'll get it
So
to
if
you today.
can help me, I'd be
Yes,
glad
sir.
to meet.
Florida passed a similar bill, but your bill seems to go a whole lot further than the bill in Florida. Your bill actually introduces a criminal offense, and that's very alarming to me. So, for example, Little Rock School District has, I believe, in their procurement policy where they do 10% of business with minority-owned business and women-owned business, 10% with each. And so that would be a criminal offense going forward if your legislation passes, if they continue that policy. Am I correct, or am I interpreting your legislation
You're
wrong?
correct. I think if we're going to end discrimination and there's no penalty, discrimination will never end.
So,
There has to be, if you'd like to have a lesser penalty, I'm open to that. But at some point, if you're going to end a certain behavior, there has to be a consequence for breaking the law. And if this passes, then and the school district continued that policy, they'd be violating the law. But if there's no penalty for that, why would they change?
no further questions.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Representative Springer, are you still in the, okay.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a number of questions that I wanted to ask, but I think I'll just narrow it down. You said we only have a few minutes, so I'll respect that. Senator, did I not hear you say that government has been the discriminator for years, for years, and we're talking about government, we're talking about the state of Arkansas too, right? Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, if this bill is passed, do you not think that this will continue the discrimination that has been going on since forever, since the state has been, right, yes, thank you, a part of this union, yes.
Well, discrimination actually preceded that.
Okay.
There's always been discrimination.
All right,
And
so
there's no end to it.
So you're going to perpetuate the discrimination by passing this bill then?
Well, again, we're going to disagree there because this bill opens these programs up to anyone.
Okay, couple more questions. Are you aware that federal law trumps state law?
I am.
Are you aware of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Have you read that? All right, thank you.
May I respond? This bill specifically, I can find the line, says that if you're participating in affirmative action, at the federal level, you can continue to do that. It says this bill, if a school or business has a quota in there or a percentage participation, and likely schools will fall into that if they're accepting federal money and this bill comes into play, then they are exempt from that. That's what the bill says, and this bill does not section. So this bill doesn't impact federal.
Well, I guess I'm confused then, because in other places it says something different, so I'm confused by the entire bill then, if that's what it says.
Well, it is what it says.
Okay, well then.
And it says that on page 11, line 13, prohibit the consideration by the state of bona fide qualifications based on gender. It goes through that. Invalidate a court order, prohibit action necessary to establish or maintain eligibility for federal programs. So if the school is doing that based on federal programs, that's allowable.
Okay, so there's ambiguity in this bill then, is what I hear you saying.
No, you hear me saying it's very clear.
Well, okay, thank you.
Representative Shepherd.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here. I guess I'll piggyback off what my colleagues have said in reference to schools. In Section 5 and Section 6 of the bill, it addresses higher education. As a graduate of UAPB, I'm concerned. So what impact will this have on historically black colleges?
If they're private, none. If they take, again, that's my understanding, it's private money. If it goes through a foundation, which many universities have foundations, that's not state money. That's foundation money. So if you're a private entity and you are taking state money that violates the provisions of this bill, yes, they'd have to stop. I'm not aware of what those are.
Okay, so can I request that you reach out to the chancellors of the HBCUs in Arkansas and have a conversation
Sure.
with them? Okay, and my next question is, well, I guess my next statement, and I'm having difficulty understanding this bill as well. You initially started this conversation off stating that there's no more need for affirmative action in Arkansas. That statement is based upon what?
It's based upon the idea that discrimination will never end discrimination. That if we're going to stop discriminating as a state, we're going to have to end discrimination. And the trend now is to identify more groups that are aggrieved, are facing discrimination based on your income, your level, your background. There are a lot of things that our entire population suffers from discrimination, some more than others, admittedly. But in order to end it, we're going to have to, at some point, end it. And I'm really concerned that I'd really like to see what the parameters are when one says, it's time, this is the time to end discrimination. You know, Chief Justice O'Connor said in 2003 that she thought in 20 years there'd be no more need for affirmative action. So we are at the point as a nation and as a state where we have to have these conversations. I would challenge I've been challenged on several things, and rightly so. And I meet with historically black colleges. I'm anxious to have that meeting. But at some point, there are going to have to be some parameters where we all agree, or most of us agree, that the need for affirmative action is gone. And I'd like to hear what those parameters are.
Thank you for your time.
So I think we're butting up to the end of the time. Senator Love, you had the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Sullivan, as I listened to this conversation, you started with the fact that we needed to have a conversation, and I'm with, I believe Representative Allen said, we probably should have had the conversation before you drafted the bill. Secondly, I think you can look around the room and take into account that this bill is really going to impact people in a detrimental way. I'm kind of sad to hear you say that you're gonna put it on the Black Caucus to file a bill to end discrimination when we're the people that are being discriminated against. I mean, how are you gonna ask people who have been discriminated against, and this is what you said on the record, and since the beginning of time, I believe, and discrimination will always be with us, that's what you said. How would you put it on us to bring a bill to end discrimination?
I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. I mean, the purpose of me being here today is to hear people who have an opposing view. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to sit down and have a conversation. And if your position is, and I'm not saying that's true, I'm not supposing, but if one's position, yours or anybody else's, that a certain population will always be discriminated against, and they will always, well, just let me finish.
Those were your words now, but own your words, because those are the words that you used. I did not use those words.
I'm not attributing them to you. What I'm saying is one who believes that there will always be people discriminated against, and that's true, and there will always be a need for government to intervene, then let me hear what that package is. And I think when I'm not, if I say I'm laying it on the Black Caucus, I think it's incumbent upon all of us. The White Caucus, the Asian Caucus, the whatever caucus you want to have, we've got to sit down around the table and see what the parameters are for us to end this, because I think we can.
Okay,
Government-sponsored
So
discrimination.
then, I'm following your logic. Why did you not file a bill to end discrimination and not this bill? Because this bill does not end discrimination.
Well, the title of the bill is.
Well, I mean, I
an act to
understand
prohibit-
the title of the bill.
Okay, well,
But this is not the bill to end discrimination. This is the bill to end the programs that were implemented so that it could be a level playing field.
right.
That's not a bill to end discrimination.
You're correct.
So-
But you didn't let me read the full title of the bill.
No, but it's not the title of the bill, it's what is in the bill.
But true.
And so now I'm going to go into your bill, because what you're saying, you continuously said this, but I'm going to read what's in your bill so that you hear. It says prohibition of discrimination or preferential treatment by state
Can you
entities.
tell me where you are?
I'm on page 8. I think it's page 8. It's next to the last page, but it's the new language that you put in. Because Representative Flowers was right. You struck anything that related to civil rights, and I think that is very unfortunate. But then you put in this prohibition language, and it's against any preferential treatment by state entities. And then it's so far-reaching. It's not only just the state. It's whoever even gets any funding from the state. Senator Sullivan, I would say this to you, because I don't think you even understand all the implications of your bill and all the programs that it will impact. I think it would be best for you to take the bill down until you understand all the implications. Because we were talking about real lives here that are being impacted. Whether you're talking about the Hispanic community and all the programs that we provide them, whether you're talking about the African American communities and the programs that we provide them, because it's even your testimony that the program was insignificant, but you still wanted to end it. And I'm like, if it's so insignificant, then why would you want to end it? And then Representative Flowers stated that disabled veterans are going to even be impacted. So it's women, disabled veterans. Really, to be honest, it's everybody that is not a white male. And that is just the honest to God truth. It's women, it's African Americans, it's people that are in the gay and lesbian community, it's Hispanics, it's Native Americans, but it's everybody that is not a white male. And I think it is disingenuous for you to come in here and say that we should have filed a bill to end discrimination where we're the ones that are always being discriminated against.
Yes.
That is, to me, you spoke to Representative Murdoch and you said, I do understand. And you shouldn't say that I didn't understand, but you do not understand the plight of my people. You do not understand when I go back to the community and I face these individuals. And they're saying, hey, this program helped me. Why are you trying to end it? You don't understand that plight. And so I would implore that you pull this bill down, because we are talking about real lives right now. And if you do not know the ramifications of what this bill is going to do to our communities, I think you shouldn't run it. Because it does not end discrimination. It only widens the gap. And that is unfortunate that you don't see that. It doesn't matter if 8 other states passed a bill like this. When we put in rules 20 years ago, I don't even have to talk about back to the 50s and the 60s. We're talking about 20 years ago, and you want to undo it. To me, that is a travesty. That we only had not even a generation's worth of programs to try to equal the playing field, and we want to end them saying, hey, you know what? There's no longer a need for them. By your own admittance that there is still discrimination, there is a need for the programs. That is your own testimony. So I would implore you, pull this legislation down, let us have a real conversation, and then if you want to say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm trying to get at, you know what? Then we can talk about it. But this bill right here is a wide range bill that is going to end up costing the state in the long run. And I don't think that you understand the ramifications of this bill. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm concluding my comments.
Yeah, I'll respond. First of all, your implications that no black people support this bill, African Americans support the bill, by saying this is a bill. Okay, your statement was this is a bill to help white people. That's what you said. And
Hold on. Let's get it for the record. Let's get it for the record because Mike Wickline is here.
Mr. Chair, if you're going to interrupt, I thought I had an I never interrupted Senator Love, not once.
Go ahead. Hold on 1 second. We're going to let you have it. Go ahead, Senator.
I'll yield the floor to Senator Love.
I did. This is what I said for the record. Mike Wickline is here, so I'm pretty sure he has this. I said all the persons that are implicated in this bill are women, African Americans, Hispanics, disabled veterans. Everybody is everybody except for white males. That's what I said.
Okay.
I said that for the record.
Okay. For the record, there are African Americans that support the bill.
Okay,
Quite
but that's not.
Wait a minute. Now let me finish. I'll yield again to Senator Love if he wants to say something. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, listen, I don't want to be rude, and this is your committee meeting. It's your people, and if he has more he'd like to say, go ahead.
Hold on. Go. Senator Sullivan, go ahead and do this. Will be it. So go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, there are many people of all. There are many people of all. Shoot, stop it. There are many people that support the bill because it's about ending discrimination. There are a lot of people of all races, genders, sexes who sincerely want to end discrimination. You can look at the Supreme Court will likely end discrimination in college admissions very soon. There is a need for that to happen. To the statement that I don't understand, I think that's a presumption that sounds good, but as I don't understand your position, neither do you understand mine. And to make that, I'm sorry. To make that presumption that you understand me is just as wrong as making the assumption that I don't understand you. But you're welcome to hold that position. The reference has been made several times to the fact that we strike, or that they're stricken the references to civil rights. I challenge anyone to tell me what civil rights have been, this bill ends. I think it's a false argument. And I think to raise that question that this is an attack on civil rights, show me where and how. The attempt of the bill, and again, you can choose not to agree or to say I'm disingenuous or however you want to frame it. This is an attempt to start this discussion about how we get there. And if your position is we'll never get there, okay, that's your presumption. And it has value, and I'm willing to come here and listen to your positions. Folks, any of you that have been sitting at a table like this know it's very difficult. And the easiest thing would be to tell you, I'm not coming, and try to throw the bill down and run the bill and see where it went. I haven't done that. I've agreed to meet with everybody who wants to meet. My history as a legislator has been a willingness to listen to people and amend the bill. Matter of fact, my phone just ringing from an African American woman in my community who's putting together a Zoom call for me to meet the leadership in Jonesboro. That's what I do. So to say I'm stuffing it down people's throat, for one, to imply that I'm trying to run a bill without discussion, without having an open mind, I reject that. For anyone to say I'm unwilling to amend the bill, I reject that. It's just not true. I've made notes that I want to talk with, and folks, I'm working with people across our nation on this. Not, the question was made, who originated this? Who am I working with? I'm working with people across the nation who have a desire to end discrimination at the state level. And there's been several references today about the attempt that this bill has, thereby I have, to end discrimination. I reject that. This bill ends state-sponsored discrimination. That's clearly what it does. And to say that this bill tries to end discrimination is just a false premise that I reject. And I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Chair, and with that I close. With a willingness to come back again, if you want to talk, I'd be very willing to meet privately with a group or others. And I, again, have extended that invitation through the end of this week. And I'll be then the following week, as legislators know, if we have amendments to make, that would happen the following week. And then it would sit on the table that week. And if we decide to go forward with it, it would be a couple of weeks before that actually happens.
Thank you, Senator. I think there is a willingness for us to continue this dialogue. So if we can, I'll get with you and we'll schedule some time to revisit some of this. I do appreciate you sitting at the end of the table and taking some of these tough questions. I think there is unfortunately, I still think there's a disconnect by some of the statements that were made and questions that were asked, and I think there's an opportunity for us to get clarity in that, and we're going to work to do that. So thank you for your time, and I know you've got another meeting to get to, so thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be glad. I've heard you had requested information, and I've requested some also, and I'll be glad to share that with you and the chair of the Democrat Party. I recognize there are two separate groups, and willingness to work with everybody involved. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to move on.